The other companies that I'm involved, one is called Valence Energy. This is in the energy management space. In fact, this company is working very closely with Cisco. By the way, who is an employee at Cisco here? Quite a few. Okay, so you kind of help. Very good, thank you. So Valence is working very closely with Cisco. And then NetMagic is a data center company based out of India. I kind of seed funded this company back in 2000, doing very well. And we believe that this would be a good IPO in the next 2 years or so in India. And then another one that I've just gotten involved recently is a company called Vertiv, which is in virtualization, cloud deployment automation. So this is a software that actually helps to deploy private clouds using the virtualization technologies. Okay? So I'm sorry I had to rush through and I didn't give much opportunity for you to ask questions, but feel free.
Yeah, in the first question you mentioned about the development in India at the early phase or not. So what do you suggest and what are the thoughts?
Good question. Very good question. So this is my philosophy. If you're building, it ultimately comes down to what kind of product or what kind of problem you're solving. So if you're building an infrastructure product, right, that requires a lot of hardcore technologies, I wouldn't recommend you to go with India day one. So because the market is here, right, and you're learning, and there's a lot of constant feedback that needs to go into the product. And all of that, has to be happening pretty much real time. You cannot wait 12 hours between here and India, and that just slows down. And in startup, right, it's all about time to market. How fast can you bring the product is the critical thing. So for infrastructure companies, I would not recommend using India day one. So at least once the first product comes out, then you should look at India. But for Valence, for example, that's an energy management solution, right? So over there, it so happened that the people back in India are also well versed with this technology or this concept. And the founder created, an entity in the US and in India. So he has a set of team players who work very closely with India, and that's actually working out very well. So obviously, if you find that partnership with somebody whom you have trust, who has the expertise, even Ankina, for example. Ankina, the same thing happened with Ankina as well. The founders knew some core team members in India who could build the first 7 or 8 folks, the key people, almost day one. And when you have that trust, and when the people have expertise in that area, then I think in case of Ankina, there was about 50–60% R&D coming out of US, and about 30–40% coming out of India. Although in case of Ankina, I think in the first 1–1.5 years, it was mostly testing that was being done, a little bit of development.
I have a question. This goes back to a little bit of personal background that you gave initially about how you quit your job and started off. Is age a factor? Slightly personal, you might choose to decline the question, but is age a factor when you make such a decision? And
to quit my job?
I'm talking in general.
Yes.
And is there a point in your career, or how do you basically decide, is my question? Is it, do you decide based on experience or conviction, or how do you know that you're overshooting into optimism and, not in that reality space? Because that happens a lot of times, because of which we see a lot of failed startups.
I agree, yeah. No, very good question. I think, personally to me, without the right experience and right connections, so which is networking, not computer networking, human networking, I think those two are very important, right? So once you are at a stage, of course, you cannot really understand and an ability to solve all aspects of it. But at least you should be in a position to visualize that this is a solvable problem, right? So that's what I've seen in both, I mean, in my own case as well as in other companies that I've been involved with, where founders have made that jump, right? When they have the experience and they have some connections to help bring additional team members. Otherwise, it will be a struggle. It will be a big struggle. So if you don't know anyone, if you have not built that network of people, so when I talk about network, it's not just engineers, right? It is customers or connections in sales, marketing, business development kind of areas, right, who can help you and be part of the team, right, to build the company into a successful one.
And then my first question about age.
About what?
About age.
Oh, age.
Is that a factor?
Age doesn't really matter. I think in case of infrastructure companies, if you're building, right, it takes at least 8 to 10 years for you to grasp all aspects of it. But if you're doing a .com kind of a company, I mean, you've seen Facebook CEO, the high school kids, and my son just finished interning at LinkedIn, and it was fascinating actually to watch this kid. Every day he comes back home with new ideas. And actually, he has now kicked off a company. I mean, he has taken some idea that he got during this whole process, and he has hired, supposedly, in his mind, he thinks she's the first employee. No salary is being given to anybody, and no LLC is being formed either. But in his mind, he thinks he has formed a company now. Yeah, so I don't think that much experience is needed in the internet Web 2.0 kind of company. Yeah. I mean, there are other people, right? Anshu, he's working on the infrastructure. What do you think?
I think on the infrastructure side, you're right. Without understanding the entire system, it's very hard to actually get into it, right? And it takes 10 years, but let's start with the teams are hiring. The engineering side, it's at least minimum 15 years of experience because we need a good 2 or 3 life cycle experience to understand what the problems are, how to market transition, and so on. So it's very hard to hire someone young. But apart from that, we're looking at these, I think VCs in general, in my experience, when a 21-year-old is going to raise money, they will be concerned. But beyond that, once you're in late 20s, early 30s, then age is not an issue at all. You're experienced enough to do that. In fact, they'll be very worried if you're 65 and trying to raise money for the first time.
Yeah. Yes.
Was your question that are you too old to jump into a startup? Sometimes like if you're beyond 45,
too young.
start thinking about startup. Was that your?
You don't, yeah.
That's what I was concerned about, whether this question would be taken in a sense of worrying about too young or too old.
Anecdotally, like
It
one
was-
of the successful entrepreneurs, Kumar Marawali, in the value founders brokerage, started off when he was 55. So.
There is a whole range
Yeah,
of people,
so-
and we all know about it, but bringing that factor in, because I'm sure people think about it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And how important is that factor is what I wanted to know about.
But, I mean, as Anshu said, I've seen people in 30s starting infrastructure companies. Yeah, because you pretty much would have almost 8 to 10 years of good experience at that time.
Before kids are up.
So you can start. Yeah.
I see you are betting on 2 areas. One is virtualization and cloud, and you're also betting on energy management.
Yes.
What do you think, if you can spend like maybe 30 seconds on each of those spaces, what do you think where the world is going with virtualization and cloud?
Oh, I think this virtualization is absolutely a disruptive technology. And I think pretty much everything that we see that you can run in a hypervisor, environment will end up running. So whether it's a load balancer, whether it is a firewall, or any of these technologies, eventually they all have to become a piece of software that runs in the virtualized environment. So because today the underlying platform has tremendous computing power that did not exist many years ago, right? So when you have that tremendous computing power, accepting, core products, right, like this Cisco CSRs and core type of products. Personally, I believe the world is going to be moving heavily towards this virtualized environment. More and more of the infrastructure applications will be running on top of virtualized environment.
A cloud network, you see, like I work with Cisco CIOs and a lot of SVPs at Cisco. We are moving into cloud space, as you may know, but there is a fear. If I take my CIO as a customer who will be selling cloud to, there is a fear in her that not many CIOs, in a downtime they say, yeah, we want to move from a CapEx to an OpEx model, but there is a fear that CIOs will not invest in an OpEx model when there is an uptick back in the economy. Do you see that? Do you hear that as well?
Well, I think, once again, right, in any of these markets, there is this early adapters who kind of set the trend. So when I was at 3Leaf, obviously many of the CIOs and the CTOs that I was meeting were primarily the early adapters, whether it's in financial sectors, whether it's in other markets. Every one of these guys, in fact, they have architectures that I can show you, which kind of talks about how you would build private clouds inside the organization, how, in fact, many of these guys have even gone to the extent by saying that each business unit, right, large business unit, which runs their own IT, what they're looking at is you now have a single IT which sort of loans or sells the services to different business units. It should no longer be a responsibility to run an IT for these business units. What do you need? At the end of the day, you need an SLA. Let me give you that SLA, right? You want uptime, you want performance, you want reliability, blah, 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 all that stuff. Let me give you all that stuff. But let me build the infrastructure. And to the corporation, at the end of the day, that will save, right? Both on the OpEx side as well as on the CapEx side. I think the concern generally in the things that I've heard is that resources are unused in a business unit, right? Whereas another business unit is starving for resource.
True. Yeah, you're right. And maybe I'm taking more time than I should. Where I was going with this is like not from a private cloud perspective, but from a public cloud perspective. Do you want to hook your infrastructure to someone outside?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think many technologies still need to evolve to address the exchange or the connectivity between your corporate network and the public clouds. I know several startups that have been funded, right, to start addressing or bridging between your internal cloud to the external cloud. And just like anything else, right, these are infrastructure products. So obviously